very good evening to you. The Taoiseach Albert Reynolds, the SDLP leader John Hume and the Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams held an historic 1.5-hour meeting at government buildings in Dublin this afternoon. After the talks, they issued a joint statement in which they said they were totally and absolutely committed to democratic and peaceful methods of resolving the northern conflict. The meeting was convened to assess the possibility of establishing the proposed Forum for Peace and Reconciliation. Their statement reiterated that their objective was an equitable and lasting agreement for Northern Ireland that could command the allegiance of all. They also said they viewed the Forum for Peace and Reconciliation as a major instrument in establishing that agreement. The three leaders said they also recognised they could not resolve the northern problem without the participation and agreement of the Unionist people.
When I started out on my part of this peace process, I posed the question, who is afraid of peace? This peace process threatens nobody. It doesn't threaten the rights of anybody. It doesn't threaten their future. It doesn't threaten their views or their principles. The political battle by all the political parties will be fought in relation to the framework document which we hope to have ready by the middle of October. That's where the political battle will be fought. What we're trying to do here in the first instance is to sustain a peace process that has been started by a momentous and historic decision of last Wednesday night.
The statement is calling on everyone. And I would say to the British government and to all the parties in the north as well, calling on everyone to use all their energies to produce agreement. And as we reiterate, the process in which we're engaged offers no threat to any section of our people. And in particular, could I say to the Unionist people of the North, as the statement says, we cannot solve this problem without you. We need your agreement too.
I'm very mindful of all of those who have suffered. I'm very mindful of all of those families who have been victims of this conflict. I extend in generosity a hand of friendship to my Protestant brothers and sisters in the North. A negotiated peace settlement holds no threat to them. I extend, and this meeting is the embodiment of this, I extend an assurance the nationalists in the North abandoned for so long that this new era will bring about an agreement to which all of our people can give their allegiance.
The three political leaders afterwards answered questions from journalists. The Taoiseach was asked about the phrase permanent end to violence not being included in last week's IRA statement.
The statement, as far as we are concerned, the Irish government made our position abundantly clear from the very start that we regard the complete cessation of military operations is that the conflict is over, it's behind. If you read that statement, if you read the statement, the IRA statement of the day, that's our interpretation. And as late as last night, Mitchell McLaughlin confirmed that our interpretation of the statement was correct. So, and I think, let's be realists. I mean, and I think the British government, and John Major himself said, we're not going to hang it up on one word. It's deeds and actions that matter. There was no retaliation to the killing of a young Catholic. There was no retaliation to the bombing of the Sinn Féin office in the Falls Road. And it's when it's deeds like that and lack of retaliation that surely proves what we're trying to say here today. So the situation... Sorry? I did say it was over. Everybody...
Adam's not say that. That's your interpretation. We still haven't heard it from you.
Well, look, I mean, when are we going to stop? We're talking about people's lives here. We had Mitchell McLaughlin last night. I don't know whether you saw questions and answers, but I talked to John Bowman and asked him what was said last night. It's clear. And should we put the negatives behind us and let's get into the positives? Absolutely. We're trying to stop people being killed. We're trying to underpin a situation. And if the people, time after time, and you saw them as well as I did, time after time, going to graveyards, burying their loved ones in both communities and said, look, no retaliation. We don't want any retaliation. That's the lead that all of us politicians have to take. The people themselves who have suffered most, who have buried their own loved ones, have said to all and sundry, no retaliation. We go on positive. We're going on to build a peace process. We have got a gigantic step in the way. And we're hoping in due course that others will join to solidify what we have. That's what the vast majority of Irish people want.
And I just want to reinforce the appeal that I have made to the people who I refer to as my Protestant brothers and sisters. And I want to appeal to Mr. Trimble and others who he may represent. The people that I represent don't ask for any advantage, don't ask for any concessions even. We ask for our rights. Now, I also have buried friends and family. 13 members of our party, including women and elected councillors, have gone to early graves. Everyone in this conflict has suffered. None of us have a monopoly on suffering. So Mr. Trimble, I think, needs to accept the generosity of the sense of history that is here today, and to seek to embrace those who vote for the Sinn Féin party.
And we would ask people to understand it in the sense in which we're doing it. It's not looking for narrow advantage, political advantage, or traditional advantage or otherwise. It's a question of building on what we have. And I think everybody sitting back will recognise that that's what we're doing. No threat to anybody. And let's build the peace process from here. Thank you very much.
Read this statement.
Statement is good.
Then the Taoiseach spoke to our political correspondent, Una Claffey. She first asked him what he thought was the major significance of today's meeting.
Well, I think in the joint statement that I issued afterwards on behalf of the three of us was a clear commitment to democratic process and to find a peaceful solution to all our problems, and a reaching out to the unionists to say that the solution cannot be found without them and without their agreement. I think that's a significant step forward and should allay some of the fears that may be out there that this decision taken last Wednesday night was not the end of the arms conflict.
So, in spite of the fact that Gerry Adams wouldn't use the word permanent today, you're still absolutely satisfied that it is a permanent ceasefire?
Very clear, absolutely. And I think Mitchell McLaughlin moved it forward even a step further last night in saying that our interpretation of the statement was correct. Now, this is the type of statements and words I think that the British government and the Unionist Party would like to hear coming out of this meeting here today. And I think that this moves it on quite significantly.
Taoiseach, what about the whole question of arms? Did you in fact ask the Sinn Féin leader to ask the IRA to give up their arms?
I put it straight forward to Gerry Adams and said that, that's what the normal expectation of people will be in relation to it. And he responded by saying, all the parties to the arms conflict, there's far too much arms in society in Northern Ireland. And of course, it is not a question for today, it's a question for further down the line. But he wants to see all the arms taken out of the whole situation in Northern Ireland. And that's the case he would be making to the IRA. And that's his own view anyway.
Do you completely trust him now?
I have said that some time ago I formed the opinion that he was sincere about putting in place an alternative strategy to the arms conflict. I am absolutely satisfied, and the government are satisfied, that the statement we got last Wednesday night changes the whole situation. We're in a new era, and that's why it is important for me and for the government to consolidate and move forward as fast as possible. Some people may criticise the past movement, but I would point out to them that both Yasser Arafat and Rabin moved almost immediately after a peace agreement was signed there. So I think it's important to solidify what we have and move on, and hopefully that the loyalist paramilitaries will, in their own time, when they have satisfied themselves, also follow that decision.
Taoiseach, you know today that David Trimble said that, especially after today's meeting, there was absolutely no way whatsoever in which the Unionist Party would come into the forum. Is that over now, do you think?
No, well, I mean, they have said even before today that they weren't coming into the forum, and that the DUP have said the same thing. We're going ahead with the forum as indeed the first step in the total democratic process, to provide an opportunity for people to get to know each other, to work on the peace process that we're working on, solidify it, consolidate it, and then move on to the whole process of reconciliation, which is going to take a number of years out front. There's deep wounds there after 25 years of killing and bombing. And that's not going to be wiped out overnight. All of us realise that. So if the unionists can't come in at the start, maybe along the way, we leave the door open, and hopefully they will join us at some stage.
Hundreds of journalists and camera crews were at government buildings for this afternoon's historic meeting between the Taoiseach and the Sinn Féin president. Of course, the meeting came just 6 days after the IRA ended its military operations in the north. Our special correspondent, Charlie Bird.
The Sinn Féin leader Gerry Adams arrived at government buildings just after 2:30, some 10 minutes before his appointment with the Taoiseach Albert Reynolds. Scores of journalists and camera crews were waiting to record the momentous occasion. About 50 Sinn Féin supporters were gathered outside, some carrying placards and others tricolours. Before going in, Mr. Adams spoke in Irish and described the occasion as historic.
Anyway, I have it here. Go on. How are you?
Last Irish, Jerry.
Well, it's more a dirt too. Last Storrowell, Alcoid Storrowell, Augustilum, Pennu Storrowell, John Jeru, Macor, or an Sean 5, and Sean 5, Eder Muncher na Huron, August Eder Muncher na Huron, August Muncher na Broughton. As I have said in Yelga, a historic day, a historic occasion, and a historic meeting to put an end to the ancient conflict and to build a lasting peace. And I will speak to you when I come out later on.
So just after 5.5 days after the IRA ceasefire was declared, Gerry Adams was on his way into government buildings to meet the Taoiseach Albert Reynolds. The SDLP leader John Hume was already inside the building. As the hundreds of journalists and camera crews and photographers waited for the meeting to end, civil servants took the opportunity to look out of windows and also seek a glance at a little bit of history in the making. Among those in the crowd was a freelance actor from the north of Ireland, who's used to voice over Gerry Adams' words in BBC radio and television interviews. After the meeting, which lasted far longer than expected, I asked Mr. Adams about the sense of occasion.
Did you ever believe that you, as the president of Sinn Féin, would be standing there on a day like today?
Absolutely. I mean, Sinn Féin have a peace strategy. We have worked at that for the last 8 years. We've evolved our policy collectively. I mean, I'm not the person who developed all of this. We're a collective leadership, and the men and women of Sinn Féin and those who have been involved in this long struggle created today's historic occasion. And I think we all have to move it forward. We all have to move towards that accord which we underpinned in the statement today.
But the British government, John Major, unionist politicians are still, you may not like it, but are still hung up on the absence of this word permanent.
Well, we have to be patient with the British. I come from the north. I have lived all my life under partition, under discrimination, under deprivation. I've been interned and I've been shot. And if that teaches you one thing, it teaches you patience. But I have to appeal to Mr. Major to seize this moment. We are on the threshold of a new era, and he should come into it and move and propel all of us forward towards a just and a lasting peace.
Now, you say in the joint statement that we are all totally committed to democratic and peaceful methods. Do you think that is a signal that John Major should take on board, that this is your bona fide, so you've told this to Albert Reynolds, well, he believes you, President Clinton believes you?
I don't want to genuflect before Mr. Major. That is a statement which was put out because Sinn Féin is a democratic party, because Sinn Féin has been involved in democratic politics, despite the undemocratic nature of British rule, and because Sinn Féin engages only in unarmed and peaceful methods of struggle. Now, if Mr. Major needs reassurance, I and other Sinn Féin leaders have sought to reassure him in the days that have gone past. But I mean, we can't go on quibbling over words. We must move it forward.
However, there's been widespread criticism from unionists to this afternoon's meeting. Dr. Ian Paisley said it showed that Gerry Adams and Albert Reynolds were two of a kind. The chief executive of the majority Ulster Unionist Party said it sent the wrong signals to loyalist paramilitaries.
Radio 1 News, read by Ken Hammond. Good afternoon. The Taoiseach is continuing his meeting with the Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams.
As they absorbed the news of Gerry Adams' meeting with the Taoiseach and John Hume, the words on the lips of most unionists were pan-nationalist front. For the Ulster Unionist Party, not just the composition of the meeting, but its duration were cause for suspicion.
I thought this was to be a relatively short meeting, and it seems to have run very much over time. So one wonders what on earth they're talking about. Secondly, one wonders whether Mr. Spring actually informed Sir Patrick Mayhew yesterday evening when he met him that this meeting was taking place today, and what Sir Patrick's reaction was to it. And thirdly, of course, who the Prime Minister of the Irish Republic meets basically is a matter for himself. But if he is trying to build bridges with the unionist community in Northern Ireland, this seems more like finding a demolition charge than building.
If you take the opening of border roads, if you take the early release of prisoners, and then you take the propaganda effect of today's meeting, rightly described as a pan-nationalist meeting, with the arrival of the Vice President, that can easily create an atmosphere in a destabilising way, where Protestant paramilitaries might ask themselves the question, is there a role for us?
Ian Paisley heard the news of the meeting on the way to his encounter with John Major.
It's not surprising because IRA, Sinn Féin and Albert Reynolds are two of a kind. And it's not a bit surprising. It shows that the Dublin government are not in league with the British government even.
And when the two governments met for the first time since the ceasefire last night, it's likely that Dick Spring did alert the Northern Secretary to the impending meeting. The British government is still stalling on contacts with Sinn Féin until they're sure the ceasefire is permanent. Today's developments indicate more clearly than ever that Dublin feels in no way bound by London's caution.
The reaction in London to the Dublin meeting has been cool. Downing Street officials said it had nothing to do with the British government. Earlier, John Major met senior ministers to discuss the ceasefire. Within the past half hour, Ian Paisley has arrived at Downing Street for talks with the Prime Minister. Our London correspondent, Brian O'Connell.
British government sources today commented tersely that the Dublin meeting with Gerry Adams had nothing to do with them and that the Taoiseach was free to meet whomever he wished. Senior ministers gathered at Downing Street this morning to discuss the latest developments in the peace process. The low-key meeting was chaired by the Prime Minister. Afterwards, Downing Street stressed that the British government would respond positively to the ceasefire, but ministers have decided to stick firmly to their insistence that the IRA must clarify its statement that the violence is over for good. The perception here is that the Taoiseach is now forcing the pace of the process and putting Mr Major under increasing pressure. The two governments may be marching in the same direction, but at different speeds. Government sources here have again been stressing that they will respond positively to the ceasefire once they're convinced that the violence is over for good. They're saying that it's now up to Sinn Féin and the IRA to declare that the ceasefire is permanent. In that, their tone is exactly the same as it was the day the ceasefire was declared. And they're saying that the next move is up to the IRA.
Coming in part two, the other news of the day, the Minister for Health